Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'm glad to have you with us this afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today as we discuss the importance of meaningfully integrating high quality youth apprenticeship opportunities into high school pathways. I'm Erica Simon. I'm the Deputy Director of PAYA, and just wanted to introduce myself quickly before we introduce the other folks that are going to be on moderating and sharing on this call. Seeing the success of the registered apprenticeship model, both here and abroad, we know youth apprenticeship has emerged as a premier strategy for bridging the gap between classroom learning and career success. Driven by unprecedented talent shortages and a growing demand for affordable education to career pathway options, these programs are no longer just an alternative to college for all. They are a core economic and educational priority for transitioning students to beginning being work ready. A high quality integrated model ensures that students graduate high school already ahead. And by providing a seamless continuum that includes high school diplomas, transferable college credits, and industry recognized credentials, we reduce barriers to entry and provide young people with a significant head start on a prosperous career. Despite rapid growth, a significant disconnect remains between youth apprenticeships and existing high school career pathways. Too often, these opportunities operate in silos outside of formal CTE structures, leading to a duplication of effort, additional costs, and missed opportunities for students to earn meaningful articulated credit. So today's conversation, Connected by Design, will share findings from recent national research featured in our soon-to-be released Connected by Design report, highlighting 6 programs across the U.S. that are making strong progress toward providing opportunities, preparing students for college, career, and beyond. We'll go on to the next slide. And without further ado, I am happy to introduce Kathleen Mathers from the Education Strategy Group, who will be moderating this discussion with me and Mary Taylor, our featured speaker for today's conversation. So, a little bit about both Kathleen and Mary. Kathleen Mathers is a founding member of the Education Strategy Group and currently serves as the principal of the Career Readiness Portfolio. Her work specializes in designing demand-driven career pathways that offer focused career advising, high-quality industry-aligned work-based learning experiences, early post-secondary opportunities, and culminate in a high value credentials to put more learners on a path to economic and career success. And our featured speaker, Mary Taylor, is an industry training specialist in the Office of Career and Technical Education at the Kentucky Department of Education. In addition to serving as a conduit between CTE students and employers as a mechanism for workforce development, Mary's primary responsibility is managing the Tech Ready Apprenticeships for Careers in Kentucky program, TRAC. As part of her work related to TRAC, Mary was named Apprenticeship Ambassador for the U.S. Department of Labor in 2022. Later on in our agenda, Mary will tell the TRAC story from why and how the program was developed and where they are now. We'll go on to the next slide. And before we turn our attention to Mary, I will ask Kathleen to speak to ESG's research conducted over the past several months, beginning with the current state of youth apprenticeship across the country and how integrated programs can benefit students. Then she will share some key findings from 6 program mini case studies featured in the Connected by Design report that will be out next week, closing out with our vision for the future of youth apprenticeship in the U.S. So I will pass it over to Kathleen.
Great. Thank you, Erica. Appreciate the warm introduction. Just an expression of gratitude for all of you who have tuned in to listen and learn with us this afternoon. As Erica said, we're going to start kind of big and broad, and we're going to narrow in focus as we go throughout the day. I'm going to start with just setting some tone and context around the field, big picture. We know that registered apprenticeship programs are expanding rapidly, And you all know this too, but there's sort of three really key indicators or driving indicators of that expansion. Number one, we know it expanding because of the resources being dedicated to it. There are significant federal dollars, most recently $84 million commitment to grants from the current administration, voicing confidence in this as a really effective lever at moving people into good job opportunities that families. The second sort of indicator of just a really healthy and thriving registered apprenticeship model is that we have more and more people who are participating across all populations, but especially beneath the age of 24, where we've seen a 37% increase since 2020 in those who have been part of registered apprenticeship programs. So that's nearly 400,000 apprentices across the country. And so that's an encouraging indicator as well. And then third, not finally, but another indicator that we should take into consideration that shows just really healthy expansion is that the industry sectors of focus themselves are changing. Historically, as you all know, we have primarily seen registered apprenticeship take place in skilled trades. And more recently, we've seen some other sectors sort of peeking in a little bit and saying, hey, that seems like a pretty effective strategy you all have going on of building your talent pipelines and getting ready workers into these good job opportunities. So we've seen fields as diverse as IT, healthcare, and education all beginning to push into the registered apprenticeship space. So we have this really healthy and thriving opportunity. And Caroline, if you want to flip over to the next slide there. At the same time, we want to recognize that adult apprenticeship programs are not the same things as youth apprenticeship for good reasons. So, as we talk about youth apprenticeship today, it might be helpful to kind of keep these markers in mind. First of all, adult apprenticeships historically tend to be more singularly focused. They are designed for learners either after high school or completely outside of the high school experience. And they tend to focus on specialized areas, full-time employment within a particular industry and occupation, right? It's a singular focus. How do we move these people into good job areas in these particular fields? Youth apprenticeship, on the other hand, is designed differently and focused differently. At its core, youth apprenticeship is designed specifically for high school learners and often function as a partnership between K-12, higher education, and the employer community. We're trying to put all those pieces together in a really thoughtful and connected way. And that's because, yes, we are trying to develop students' readiness for employment, and we are also trying to support their planning and preparation for their broader education and career goals, including college. So we're trying to do a both and approach that keeps those pieces very tightly connected, which makes it different than most adult registered apprenticeship programs. So, with that framing in mind, the last thing I'll say, sort of as youth apprenticeship as a field, is that it has evolved rather rapidly over the past 7 years. And I don't think it's possible to sort of overstate the importance of PAYA in that work. 7 years ago, we had a lot of isolated pilots that were happening in a number of places across the country. There wasn't much agreement on what we meant by a quality experience. And so there was a lot of unevenness happening across the field. 7 years later, here we are. PAYA has helped us sort of name what we mean by quality youth apprenticeship experiences. We have 30 states in DC that have adopted definitions of quality, and we're seeing an increasing number of students who are participating in youth apprenticeship. So just like the adult registered apprenticeship programs, we're seeing indicators of youth apprenticeship expanding and thriving rapidly. So next slide, Caroline, I think the premise that we bring into today's conversation is that as effective as youth apprenticeship is and can be, we can have stronger student experiences if we do a better job integrating those youth apprenticeships within high school pathways. And there are a number of reasons that we sort of hold this belief. Number one, that it creates stronger alignment between classroom and career, that we're providing context to learners, that it's not just about the youth apprenticeship experience, but that is being embedded within a pathway that provides the rigorous sequence of courses, the early post-secondary opportunities, and that hands-on learning. So it makes the combination of those things makes things relevant and engaging for learners. The integration also expands career exposure and exploration. I tend to think about this sort of in stark terms. It's probably not quite this black and white. But in general, pathways often provide the early exploration experience, and youth apprenticeship often provides the slightly deeper experience. So if I think about that pathways exploration, it's often along the lines of students thinking about, do I like this field? Am I interested in this? Am I good at this? What are the early experiences I can have that help me figure out answers to those questions? And then the youth apprenticeship experience picks up from there and says, okay, if I'm comfortable in this space, which role in this field might fit me best, right? It's sort of a continuum that connects really well when we design it intentionally that way. Integration accelerates post-secondary and workforce readiness. We've already said this. This is a both and. This is about preparing kids for the workforce opportunities and also for post-secondary opportunities. So we are simultaneously helping them earn high school credit, college credit, industry credentials, all in sort of a thoughtful, coherent way because we've co-designed them together. Fourth, we're increasing opportunity and access, and we're trying to reduce barriers that just get in students' way. Tuition, schedules, all those kinds of things that come up because we've built the youth apprenticeship into a pathway that's already taken those things into consideration. So we're trying to clear those barriers out of the way. And last but not least, we think about integration of youth apprenticeship and pathways in terms of social capital as well, and helping students develop and build large multi-purpose networks. So they're not just building relationships with employers, as important as that is, but also continuing to build relationships with teachers, with instructors, with advisors, who are helping them to build a big picture mindset about what they want to do with their futures and what are the pathways that are open to them. How are they pursuing those opportunities to get to the place where they're trying to go? Pulling that together, I think that keeping these benefits in mind really helps drive the integration of the apprenticeship and pathways space to serve our bigger purpose, right? We are trying not to treat career preparation and college preparation as separate paths. We're trying to bring these pieces together in really thoughtful, integrated ways. The field's working hard in that direction, and we think bringing these pieces together will help with that sort of bold ambition. But as we'll see on the next slide, if it's so important and there are so many benefits, why isn't this happening with greater frequency? Well, the answer is it's hard and it's a little bit complicated, right? So number one, the question we often get is why? Why should I do this, right? Districts and schools have largely developed pathways and youth apprenticeships separately. They've been separate things, and you may have districts and schools who are feeling really good about their pathways. And now, if you're asking that we bring youth apprenticeship into those pathways, it can feel disruptive more than beneficial, especially if they're not clear on why they're going to do this. So we've got to lay the foundation for why this matters. And that goes back to the reasons I just shared, the benefits. The second question we also get is, okay, I'm with you. How am I supposed to do this? I don't have many incentives that are available to me to really drive this work forward, and I don't see a lot of exemplars or models out there that I can draw from. So we need to put those pieces in place to help move that forward. And then the third, if we're being honest, is sort of a healthy skepticism that still exists in the field, that sometimes youth apprenticeship can be characterized as a pathway for students who are career bound and not college bound. And while those of us who work deeply in this space know that's not at all the intention of youth apprenticeship, that is something that we hear in the field from time to time. And so cognizantly, we need to pull those pieces together and continue to reinforce the very intentional connection between preparing students for workforce and post-secondary education and training. That's a big and between them. Next slide, Caroline. So if we are trying to pull all those pieces together, what then is our sort of vision for the future of youth apprenticeship in integrating these different pieces? We found in general that there are sort of four primary strategies driving the field. These are not exclusive. I'm sure there are many beyond this as well, but for purposes of today's conversation, we think it might help to focus on these things. In order to effectively integrate youth apprenticeship and pathways, number one, we've got to have those really strong cross-sector partnerships. We got to have K-12, higher education, workforce, employers, often intermediary organizations, all rolling up sleeves together around the same table, asking, what are we trying to do collectively? How are we going to do that? How will we know that we're successful and have impact? That's core to this work moving forward. The second piece is we need our state leaders to push in. We need statewide policies and accountability measures that will really incentivize youth apprenticeship and pathways and the integration of those two pieces. That will help then with designing pathways that have a pretty flexible orientation to them that will allow students to accelerate their pace, to pause, to pivot without penalty, so that as students travel down one road, they understand this is for them or not for them, and they can make adjustments as needed. And then, last but not least, when we put all these pieces in place, we still need high value, high use resources that are available to districts and schools. In a nutshell, we want to make change easy, and the more we can put turnkey resources into their hands to help facilitate these strategies, the more quickly we're going to see integration meaningfully take shape between youth apprenticeship and pathways. So, if these are our enabling conditions, what are some sort of corresponding implementation strategies? These are probably pretty obvious, so I'll name them quickly. We need to intentionally design the youth apprenticeship programs as an experience within a pathway and not an add-on. We need to engage the employers in co-developing the curriculum and defining competencies, because this isn't just about preparing kids for post-secondary education and training, it's preparing for workforce readiness. And we have to bring those pieces together, and employers are key to being able to do that well. Our coursework sequences within pathways, we might need to make some adjustments and modifications, because we are also thinking about students' readiness for apprenticeship placements. And what modifications does that mean we need to make to our coursework sequences to make sure that they are ready? And then last but not least, expanding access to tuition-free dual enrollment or early credit opportunities, so that we don't have lingering barriers in front of our students for accumulating transferable credit that will count towards what they hope to do next in their professional pathway. So, with that in mind, ESG has spent the last several months sort of combing the field to understand what this looks like in practice. Our goal was not to be exhaustive. We were not trying to find every single youth apprenticeship program in the country and figure out if there's a really strong integration strategy there or not. Rather, our goal was to find places across the country, a handful of them, that we could say there's really good integration strategy happening here. How can we study and learn from this and lift this up in a way that might help others who are trying to move similar strategies forward? So you can see we've got about 6 places across the country that we'll dabble in quickly today. Our report will be released next week with far more detail on each of these, and certainly any of us remain available to you should you have questions or want to talk through anything that we learned in the course of this research. But if we move on to the next slide, the place where I'll start is that even though we were looking at 6 distinct programs across the country, these were all different models. No one is doing the exact same thing in the exact same way, very contextually based. But they do have things in common across all 6 of these. We know that post-secondary credit is being offered and awarded through dual enrollment. There's a quality paid on-the-job experience that's being provided that's aimed at a particular workforce opportunity. And there are opportunities for students to earn credentials that open doors to good jobs and that often count towards post-secondary credit as well. So they share these similarities, but there are also differences across the programs. So you can see we're all over the country. And I'm just going to speak very quickly to each of these things to give you a little bit of a taste for how they're approaching integration, and what we're going to profile more deeply in the report that you can see next week. I'm going to start with track, but I'm going to say very little on track because we have an expert in the house who's going to go deeper in that space. So, Mary, I'm not stealing any thunder. I couldn't if I tried. But just to lift up for those who are listening, that we have the Tech Ready Apprenticeship for Careers in Kentucky, affectionately known as TRACK. I think many of you are probably very familiar with this. It is a state-run youth apprenticeship program. And I think the integration piece that we want to lift up here that Mary will expand on when I hand the microphone over to her is that this is very intentionally tied to CTE programs of study, and in fact requires that the full track pathway consists of at least 3, but often 4 courses, and students have to take the first 2 before apprenticeship placement. So you can see that integration just very intentionally being built into that model. And then additional coursework happens concurrently with the experience itself. So I'll leave it to Mary to share a little bit more about the background and how this came to be and how they've operationalized it, the impact it's having, and even the scholarship opportunities that they've put in place to really make it go at scale. So I'll move on to a couple of the others. We'll jump in here. Let's go with our West Coast friends. We have a couple out there on the West Coast. The local apprenticeship uniting a network of college and high schools. It's a mouthful. We'll just call it Launch in Southern California. And I'll link that a little bit with our Aerospace Joint Apprenticeship Committee, which we call AJAC, which is an advanced manufacturing apprenticeship. So we've got Launch in Southern California and AJAC just north of that in Washington. I think the similarities here are that these are both intermediary focused. And that's really important to point out that to really drive that integration, as I said earlier, you've got to have the healthy cross-sector relationships there. Um, Launch is that regional intermediary that's pulling together K-12 districts, community colleges, employers, workforce boards, and they as an intermediary and pulling people together around a table and saying, wait, what are the workforce opportunities that you're trying to fill? What are the related higher education opportunities for kids? How do we pull these together and combine them? So that youth apprenticeship is not just an add-on experience, but a fully integrated and essential component of a student's larger educational journey. So you've got supervised on-the-job training that's happening with industry partners, and you've got each pathway being delivered either by partner community colleges or CTE courses delivered by the high school. And that's all in partnership across those cross-sector relationships. Similarly, AJAC is also an intermediary organization. I'm sure that many of you are familiar with them. We've profiled them in PAYA before, given the strong work that they do. They are sector specific. They are looking at advanced manufacturing in particular, and AJAC is the intermediary and the sponsor to bridge the gap between the school systems and the talent needs of the advanced manufacturing industry. How do we pull these partners together? How do we meaningfully put this program together that we are thinking about both education, future aspirations, and industry needs, and create a range of opportunities that are available to kids? So, really exciting programs there. If we veer over to the East Coast to our friends in Charleston, we have the Charleston Regional Youth Apprenticeship Program. Many of you know this is led by Trident Technical College, Trident Tech, that we've spoken of often here in PAYA. And I think the thing we want to lift up here, well, first of all, the impetus of the program came from business and competition. And I believe it was Boeing who landed there, and suddenly there was a big fish in the backyard. And the other industry partners were saying, oh, wow, we might have a hard time with talent with such a big industry partner here. Is there something we can do to ensure that there is talent to go around? And so that cross-sector set of relationships kicked in. Trident Tech really led the way and designed something that when students complete the program, they will have not only earned their high school diploma, they will have approximately 30 college credits that they've accumulated and 2 years of paid employment. So you pull all those pieces together, and students can continue on a path into a job. They can continue to a 2 and 4 year degree program. And we've got our district leaders that are negotiating the dual enrollment and articulation agreements to make sure that they are going to count, that they are going to transfer for credit. So those pieces come together really meaningfully. If we pivot back up to this northwest-ish, South Dakota, our friends in South Dakota, the Career Ready South Dakota Capstone. Want to emphasize Capstone here, that this is a partnership between the South Dakota Department of Education, excuse me, and their Department of Labor and Regulation as well. So education and workforce coming together. Their goal is to provide high quality work-based learning to students across the state through 5 different capstone options, one of which is a youth apprenticeship option. So students who are enrolled in the youth apprenticeship capstone course earn high school credit, they can earn college credit, and they can transfer their completed on the job hours as well after graduation. So the integration here happens when the Department of Ed says students need to complete a foundational pathways course, followed by a pathway specific course. So we're going from high level to more in depth, and then doing the capstone. So we're building readiness and understanding and situating those thoughtfully together. And then last but not least, we have our youth apprenticeship program in Wisconsin. I'm sure many of you know this because it's the oldest and largest youth apprenticeship effort in the country. And it links high school graduation requirements with industry standards very specifically. And that's part of what makes it so unique and ties these different pieces together. The instruction is tied to workplace competencies that can be delivered through high school CTE credits or through the technical college system. And the transcripted credit that students earn can transfer either to the technical college system for continued education and training or even to some of the four-year institutions. So trying to keep all those pieces together. So hopefully that gives you a feel for some of the work that we have done over the last several months. As I said, we'll have that report coming out next week. And each of these hopefully gives an example that brings to life what integration can look like, recognizing lots of opportunity for growth in this space across the country. But as I said earlier, one of our strongest examples is the track program in Kentucky. So I'm just so pleased that Mary Taylor is able to join us today to go a little bit deeper in that space and tell us how all of this has come together over time. How have you been able to do this? Where are you now? Where do you hope to go next? Thanks, Mary, for joining us.
Thank you, Kathleen, for having me. You're certainly speaking my language. I'm very happy to be here and represent all of the great work that's going on at the local level. I'm very fortunate because we have some really hard workers in school districts making this happen. And so, just to give you a little glimpse of how this got started, literally, it was a conversation, one conversation with myself and the state director of apprenticeship at the time back in 2012, Halloween day of 2012. Actually, I still remember it like it was yesterday. And I had questions, and he was not getting out of that room until I got answers. And what was driving this was because I was a career advisor at a tech center. And I saw how we were failing as educators. We were failing students and our employers. Students that we needed to be in our local workforce, and there just wasn't a clear cut path for them. And so, small town, I hope some other people can relate to this. It was my job to know what they were doing after they graduated. And I would see them literally, at Walmart, and I'd say, "Hey, how was your first semester at ABC school?" And it was everything you didn't want to hear. "I'm not going back. I hate it. I'm quitting. I'm failing." And this was top talent. And so it was heartbreaking, really, honestly. And so the more I started hearing about apprenticeship, I thought this is the missing link. This is where we need to be. CTE is a perfect feeder for this. And so that's literally a two-person conversation as to how this got started. So I say all this in hopes of encouraging others to have these conversations because it's been very, very grassroots. So I think we're ready to go into the slides. Okay, so our model is, and we built this from the ground up. Honestly, I'm so glad to see that the conversation is still going on and is strengthened because when I started, I was literally chasing Wisconsin and South Carolina. Literally, that's who I was having conversations with. Tell me, tell me. But we just felt like in Kentucky, we needed to build it with what we had in mind. And I'll be able to give some examples later on of how that has benefited us. So no matter what sector we go in, and we started literally in, our low hanging fruit was who already had registered apprenticeship programs, and that was skilled trades and manufacturing. And that's that, because there's two asks of this. Will you register an apprenticeship program, and will you hire, a high school student? And so it wasn't as big of a lift if they were already registered. So that's how we started. So our model, no matter what sector that we go into, is a minimum of 3 CTE courses related to the apprenticeship and a co-op, that paid work-based learning period experience for course credit. That co-op can be during the school day as for course credit, and then can also go on into, as long as they follow child labor laws, nights, weekends. But that is how it looks for us. Now, an employer can add more if we're able to do that and the student starts young enough, but that certainly depends on graduation requirements. That always comes first. And so if we can fit some more of those electives in, we will, but this is the model. And so students have to be a CTE concentrator in that program area that aligns with that apprenticeship, meaning they've completed 2 courses to be eligible to even apply. So, how this works is I'll contact a school and say, "We have this opportunity. I need you to get your concentrator students together so this employer can come talk to them about what it looks like to work there, what the benefits of their apprenticeship program." So then the employer will go in and sell their company and their apprenticeship program to these concentrator students. And so the employer, then they select from these students, they will apply, and then they will conduct interviews and do any pre-screening hiring that they need to do to feel confident that they are getting the right candidates. So we're not placing those students, the employers are selecting them. That's huge. So the employer will determine if the student successfully completes and transitions as a full-time after graduation. So the model is that student will have that co-op. All of those co-op hours will count towards those apprenticeship OJT hours. And the employer will determine if that student successfully completes. So on Friday, they will graduate. On Monday, the model is and the premise is they will just transition as that full-time apprentice on Monday, bringing all of their OJT with them. And I'll talk about some related technical instruction in a minute, but that is the model. Now, is it 100%? No. About 80% of our students transition, and this is the time for the students to find out, hey, if this isn't right for me, great, I'm glad you found that now. Sometimes the employer will say, you're not a good fit for us. And again, this is all the time to find this out. No harm, no foul. The student got paid, they got some great experience, and then they can go on to determine what's the next step for them. So next slide, please. So we began, I said, as that conversation. The conversation happened in 2012. We piloted it in 2013 with 3 employers in manufacturing and 7 apprentices. By last school year, we had over 1,500 apprentices completed with over 200 employers. Now, let me say this. This number could and should be much higher. First of all, COVID, we have not really, especially manufacturing, have not bounced back after COVID the way we were. However, we have many non-traditional occupations that we have gotten into because everybody's having pipeline issues. And so we've gone into many, and this model is very, very scalable. As long as we have a CTE program that works with that apprenticeship, we can move forward now. And what this has shown us sometimes is maybe the school isn't providing what their local employers need. Maybe they don't have a CTE pathway that aligns. And that's a whole nother conversation about meeting local employers' needs. So that will drive that as well. I do have some data that I always share. We have over 90,000, this is statewide data, in our career pathways, concentrator students who have had at least 2 courses in a pathway in all of our areas, concentrating across the state year after year after year. I've pulled this data for the past 6, 7, 8 years. 90,000 students. And we have about 4,000 that are participating in co-op opportunities in the track program. So, so for us, there's the co-op, and then the track is just the gold standard for the co-op. And so, because the co-op, as you know, may or may not lead to employment after graduation, the track model is designed to do that. And so we have about 4,000 students that are co-oping. So, there's a big gap there between the students that are participating and the opportunities that are offered to them. So we are the sustainable, untapped, continuous pipeline year after year after year. We have tens of thousands of students available. Next slide, please. So we're starting to see some trends, some trend data. So apprenticeship is being recognized as a valuable post-secondary option for students. This was a big ship to change. As you all know, education has done a great job of selling. You got to have that degree to be successful. And this has driven the conversation. You have to have post-secondary training to be successful. And so, we've had to sell this to parents, educators, administrators. But we are starting to see that ship has turned. It is a career pathway that leads to gainful employment. I'll share some wage data with you and retention data on that in a minute. It's reinforcing employability skills. This is why students say, this is why I have to be able to pass a drug test. This is why my attendance needs to be good, because that employer is going to interview me. They're going to look at my transcript. If that attendance isn't good, I'm going to have to answer for that. It's creating a very competitive recruiting environment. This has been so interesting to see this unfold. So we have our best students are competing against each other and interviewing against each other to get in this program, but we also have employers that are competing against each other to have access to these students. We have had significant numbers of on-the-job hours are being credited towards the apprenticeship requirement. So in an hours-based apprenticeship, we've had some students get as much as 2,500 hours towards their apprenticeship before they ever even graduate from high school. And if we're going to lowball this at an hourly rate, let's just say $10, that's $25,000 that student has earned and something that they like to do because they've already tested it out in their CTE pathway. So that's a strong indicator there. And then we have employers that are registering apprenticeship programs just to participate in track because they might say, "Hey, my competitor's doing this. I want to do it," or "I've heard about this," or "Hey, can we do this in my sector? I know you're doing this in other sectors. Can we do it in mine?" And so that's lots of conversations have brought those employers in and have scaled this into the non-traditional sectors. Next slide, please. So this is what I refer to as some of our wage data. So remember I said we started in manufacturing. So this is a 2018 high school graduate, and we get these numbers from KY Stats. That's Kentucky's longitudinal database system. And so we track our track students, and it's a 2018 graduate, 6 years after high school. They are 82% employed and making $63,000. So this is someone that was in the manufacturing track sector. Again, those numbers could be much bigger, but they're pretty impressive for what they are. So that means this number, and I'm not going to get into that today. We also include some of our pre-apprenticeship program, which does not include a work-based learning a component. It's 4 courses and an end-of-program assessment. So these are those combined. But I believe the next slide, if we can go on. This next slide is where we actually tracked these students and we compared them to the Office of Apprenticeship to see where they are. This is a 2017 graduate, 7 years after high school. They are making $74,000 and they're 100% employed. Again, a small number, but as you can see, that number is increasing. And our mean wage in Kentucky, median and mean wage is 43,000. So you can see 43 to 54,000. So these students are way above that, 7 years after graduation. So one barrier that we had, in addition to all the ones that you always hear about, child labor laws and workers' comp and all the things, and I have lots of answers for that. One of the barriers that we had that was specific to Kentucky is our students can earn the Kentucky Education Scholarship, and that's if they meet certain benchmarks in high school, like an ACT score. GPA, things like that. And so one of the barriers was students were like, "I'm going to lose my KEYS money," because it's a 4-year scholarship up to 5 years after they graduate. And they accumulate this every year of high school. So some of the students would say, "I'm going to lose my KEYS money that I've earned and rightfully earned if I participate." And so we in Kentucky had some conversations with legislators and said, we really need to try to get this changed. And so in 2018, the legislature changed this where students that were pursuing apprenticeship programs could access these funds. This has been a game changer because traditionally that money went directly to a 2 or 4 year institution. Now it looks totally different. Those students are able to get reimbursed for costs associated with the apprenticeship. So it's for things like books, tuition, uniforms, licensure, travel. So these students can use this again for up to 4 years. And I'm proud to report that I keep track of this number every year. And so since 2018, $1.2 million has been allocated to these students in apprenticeship that normally would not have been able to access these funds. So, in thinking about that, it encourages students who normally didn't care about KEYS funds to do better in school. We have more high performing students looking at apprenticeship where they maybe wouldn't have. It's creating an awareness of apprenticeship for parents and educators, and employers are seeing that we are investing in apprenticeship at the high school level, and that this is an additional tradition. This is an additional post-secondary path that's not that traditional one that everybody thinks about of the 2 or 4 year institution. We are valuing apprenticeship and that credential as much as we are in Kentucky as any other credential that they can get. Next slide, please. So as we were able to build this again from the ground up, it was very important to build this into our district accountability. So this student will get, the school will get credit for a post-secondary transition career readiness. So they get 1 point for that. And again, that was very important in us being able to build it. And I will have to say that's been very important in this initiative being run at the state level because we are able to implement some policy that has aided this. Next slide, please. So a couple years ago, our associate commissioner, Beth Hargis, got some funding from our legislature to implement performance incentive funds for CTE. And so again, track was a part of this conversation. And so the track, depending on which track they're doing, they're either range from 2 or 4 indicators. They're always going to have concentrator status. They're going to have the CTE work-based learning through that co-op. They can get the CTE dual credit indicator, and they can get industry certifications with technical skill attainment. That's the track certificate, which is issued by the Office of Industry and Apprenticeship Services in Kentucky. They are the SAA agency in our state. So right now, I think these are a little less than $500 each per indicator. So a school can recoup about close to almost approximately $2,000 per student for meeting these indicators. Next slide, please. And then we're very proud to be a PAYA network member since its inception, I believe. And so PAYA has been a great source of knowledge and resources for us. I've tapped into Taylor White many times, trying to, making those connections. They have great accelerators. If you are not a member of PAYA, definitely look at that. They have great accelerators that I've been participating in myself, even though I guess I'm a veteran in this work. But it kind of refreshes and gets my juices going again as far as certain sectors. So I think I attended manufacturing and healthcare, and they were both very good. Ivy Sullivan did a great job putting those on. Next slide, please. So I think that wraps it up for me.
Thank you so much, Mary. Such great information you're sharing about track and what you all have accomplished in Kentucky. It is really an exemplar and so impressive. We're going to just have a couple of questions for you that maybe you can share a little more about for our audience. Um, thinking about, sorry, I'm not on the right slide here. Um, Thinking about, cross-sector governance and co-design, track is, known for deep collaboration and between your Department of Education and your labor cabinet. Talk a little bit about how you've structured Track's governance to ensure that, K-12 educators and industry leaders are really truly co-designing curriculum together rather than, sort of working in parallel and silos as we often see. So, it's really about like how are you ensuring that classroom instruction mirrors, what the needs are out in the labor market?
Sure. So, there's a seamless overlap with the work processes of the apprenticeship with the CTE curriculum and standards specific to that occupation. So again, that's the driver behind this. That's why that CTE component is so important. We share our standards and their curriculum with the employer, have them look at that. Where does this align? What do you need? What is missing? We invite that employer to work with the instructor to again, what do you need that student, because that student could get a little individual attention based in this area and what the employer needs. If the student starts early enough, I mentioned this earlier, we can incorporate those additional classes that employer might need, and especially if they're doing dual credit, that's a big component there. But a student would need to probably be selected as a sophomore, start as a junior for that to happen. But we're certainly open to, again, changing the student schedule, getting as much CT as we need, but we also don't want to take away from that work-based learning experience. But the employer has, again, a lot to say about who gets in, the courses that they've had, the courses that they would take.
Yeah, that's so helpful. And I think that flexibility and ability to sort of pivot is so key seems very key in your success. And I've seen that in other spaces as well, other states as well. Um, one thing we often hear about is, how do you get the stakeholders on board, like the district to participate? So, it's really meaningful to get districts to, embed youth apprenticeship into their pathways. And it often requires a shift in how success is measured. So, how is Kentucky's inclusion of track outcomes into the accountability system? How did it impact student participation and completion of youth apprenticeships?
So Okay, that's there's kind of twofold on that.
Yeah.
You know, as we designed this, I don't think KDI Stats was even there yet. So they have helped drive. Again, they are the agency that we all sign an interagency agreement with, that we are able to we all dump data in there, all of the state agencies. And so that's how I was able to bring you that great data. That's how we capture that the shared data. So, but that also helps, that data helps me go to employers and districts and say, this is working. So that data has helped a lot. And so, you really can't argue with that. And so that has been a driver there. But I've also been able to share that data with, to get partners on board, such as economic development, chamber of commerce, associations, advisory committees at the local level. So that's been all part of that conversation as well as, in the beginning, I had no data. It was just me saying, I think this is really going to work. So now it has been gratifying to say, yes, this is working and here's the data. But it has also helped the partners and drive other people to believe and get on board and help us sell this.
Yeah, those numbers don't lie. And I mean, it is so important to be able to collect the right data, be able to you know, use it in a meaningful way to tell your story of whether it's return on investment or to show that this model really does work.
Mhm.
So that is super super helpful. Thinking about scalability is another sort of a bit of a thorn, and it's something we're always trying to crack. Scaling from a few successful pilots to a statewide standard is just really difficult. And so, what technical assistance or resources did Kentucky invest in local districts and sites to build the capacity to launch and sustain the track program? Can you talk about that a little bit?
The beautiful part about this model is it's no cost. I mean, literally, it is no cost. And everybody wants to know what's in it for them. So when we looked at it and we built it from that perspective. What is in it for each entity? Now it's very easy to see what's in it for the apprentice. It's very easy to see what's in it for the employer. So then we had to look and see what is in it for the district. So that's when I mentioned we brought it into our accountability model. Now we have those performance incentives, which that we're 2 years into that. So they're all excited about that, because the district is the one preparing the student, and so they should get the credit. And so that's when we would design that. And actually that's how even our trifold brochure, it's district, employer, student, what the benefits for each. So did that answer the question?
Yeah,
Somehow.
yeah, yeah. No, I think
Sometimes
that
I
is
get off on
helpful. But
my
I mean,
little.
I think it's worth noting, and I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, it is meaningful that all the stakeholders that are involved in youth apprenticeship and having successful programs are engaged and understand what is in it for them and
Mhm.
why they should do it. So I think we have one more question, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions at the very end. Mary will stick around, but I just wanted to ask about a little bit about policy and breaking down silos. So we've got this report coming out that ESG has worked on that emphasizes the need to remove kind of the interagency silos that really often hinder program design. You know where I'm going. From a policy perspective, what were the key unlocks in Kentucky that allowed the different state agencies to, share accountability for student outcomes?
Again, I think this is where it helped that it was a state agency. So we
Mhm.
could, talk state agency to state agency. And so, we have wonderful partners at the Office of Employer and Apprenticeships, or I'm sorry, Industry and Apprenticeship Services now. They were on board from the get-go. I think it probably did help that we were an SAA state and we could implement this a little faster. I do think that helped. Um, but again, several entities are working on our behalf because they are the ones that are getting the concerns from the people that can't find people, right? So, it's the Cabinet for Economic Development, it's the State Chamber of Commerce, it's the state associations. When they can't find people, that's who they're going to, saying, "How help us find people? How are we found? What do we need to do?" And it just so happened this was up and coming along at the same time and was so scalable to go into so many of those sectors. So that's, again, they have been great partners and great champions, but they are also helping to fulfill a need for their members and their base.
Yeah, yeah, that ability to sort of be working at the state level to kind of solve these issues and really
Yeah.
kind of unlock the barriers or break down the barriers that we so
Yes.
often find. So Mary, thank you so much for this incredible presentation and so much wonderful insight into how Kentucky is really leading the way. So as I mentioned, Mary's going to stick around at the end here first if we have some time for additional questions from the audience. But I am going to now hand it back to Kathleen to kind of wrap us up.
Great. And I'm going to keep it really brief because I suspect there are some folks who would like to have the opportunity to ask Mary some questions. So, Mary, I second Erica's thanks. Everything you were saying kind of lends itself to all of the things that we had shared before about the importance of integration and how you go about doing it, and the fact that it's okay to ask what's in it for me because we have to design with that in mind, that we're meeting the needs of a lot of different types of stakeholders in service of what we're trying to accomplish for kids. So if we go back to these sort of four primary strategies around integrating youth apprenticeship and pathways, we've just tried to kind of boil it down to a nutshell a little bit. What does each of these things look like in practice to some extent? So, number one, those strong cross-sector partnerships and governance structures. Erica just talked about this, really moving away from siloed decision making and moving into joint decision making. Easier said than done in some cases, but if we're aligned around what we're collectively trying to accomplish, it makes it a little bit easier. Co-designed curriculum, employers have to lean in, K-12 has to lean in, higher education has to lean in, make sure we're all getting what we need from that curriculum and practice. The shared accountability for outcomes because we've agreed on what it is we're trying to do, and the braided governance and funding to enhance collaboration as kind of a motivator to get those pieces moving. We know, Mary, you just said it beautifully about what you all are doing from an accountability perspective to drive incentives that change behavior and incentivize different policies and practices. So, the importance of that in saying you can earn points if we do X, Y, and Z provides powerful incentive for districts and schools who might say, I got a pretty good thing going the way I have it already. Why disrupt that? Now they've got motivation for being able to do that, complemented by high use resources. We're also going to put resources in your hands that are ready-made turnkey that will help you move in this direction of integration, whether that's through focused technical assistance, toolkits and resource kits, and or targeted professional development. There's a range of things that can be deployed in that space, and that will help with the designing programs with multiple entry and exit points so that students can accelerate, pause, or pivot in their pathways, that their credentials are stackable and portable, and that we are getting away from the tracking mindset into an integrated college and career mindset and showing the role that youth apprenticeship and pathways have in that space. So I thank you for all of you joining us today. Hopefully this was helpful. We'll have that report out next week. We'll share that with those who have registered for this. I'm going to pause, Erica, and look to you for guidance in terms of we got about 7 minutes. We can use that for Q&A for anyone who'd like to speak with Mary.
Yeah, I mean, I think we happy to open it up if folks have questions that they would like to ping over to Mary. She's a wealth of information, so let's hear from the audience if anybody has any questions. And you can feel free to just come. Are they able to raise their hand, Caroline? Or
If you all could use the Q&A function to pop in your questions, that would be great, and we can feed them over to Mary as they come in.
perfect.
We can start with one. And Mary, you kind of answered this already, but one of the questions, I think maybe going a little bit deeper into like your longitudinal data agreements, like who was kind of key in implementing those, or when you were kind of trying to measure program effectiveness and efficacy, like how did y'all start those data conversations?
I'm going to be totally honest, that is not in my wheelhouse. That, I'm just a data provider. I provide track to this all-knowing KY stats. I don't know what they do with it. I'm not a data person. I just know that all like agency heads, cabinet heads, leadership got together and all signed these agreements and said, yes, our agency will do this. We will or import this data. I mean, if they want to send me an email, I'll be glad to forward that on to our KY Stats folks to get a better answer.
Great. I know that there have been a couple of other questions in the Q&A that our team has been answering. I'll just elevate one and you can talk about it a little bit. Have you seen models that innovate around, particularly around clinicals in healthcare or apprenticeships in STEM fields? What are you seeing in Kentucky?
So yeah, we've moved into IT, healthcare, business. That one's been really interesting. Our business students are becoming insurance agents. They are going into retail occupations. There's a retail apprenticeship that the Kentucky Retail Federation created. And I'm really excited about this K through 12 education. We have what's called the teaching and learning pathway. That's the CTE pathway. So we have students that are district apprentices. Again, they must apply. It's very rigorous, but it accelerates them. They will be working for the districts, be an apprentice, and graduate with an associate's degree in their gen ed, and then they will have 2 years left to get their bachelor's in teaching. So it accelerates that pathway. And actually, at 2 o'clock today, we had there's Senate Bill 22 with some legislation that we are excited and we hope is going to pass. It's sailed through so far that will actually pay specifically for the education pathway and registered apprenticeship for these teachers. So they will be able to get their associates for free. And then there's another program that will pay for a lot of their bachelor's degree, the additional 2 years. So we hope with the apprenticeship, people can become teachers for free. Really excited about that.
Yeah, and we know that is sector that is high need in every city, every state, rural, urban, all over. So that is a fantastic one to elevate. Well, we are close to time, so I just want to say again, Mary, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be part
Yes,
of this work. Thank you
absolutely.
so much.
Of course. For everybody in attendance, thank you for being here. Our call to action for you is really simple, but super important. Take a look at your existing pathways, look for where the silos are, in classroom learning and on the job, and where are places operating in isolation, and think about and use the strategies we've outlined here to bridge those gaps. Um, we know transformation happens when we move beyond pilot programs and really start building the structural alignment necessary for every student to succeed, which is what we want. So, really, I don't know, do we want to go back to slide 22, Caroline, or to wrap up, or we can just leave it here? Our intention is to help you lead these conversations in your own states and districts. And, and really invite you to look for our report that is coming out next week, Connected by Design. It contains the case studies of the models and the sites that Kathleen presented and were the frameworks that were shared here today. And we encourage you not only to read it, but really share it broadly with your industry partners, your policy leaders, your fellow advocates, and fellow educators. It's a toolkit designed to help us all move this agenda forward together. So, on behalf of the Education Strategy Group, ESG, and PAYA, I just want to thank Kathleen for your insights and Mary for sharing the incredible work that you're doing with track in Kentucky. And really just want to thank you to everyone who is in attendance today for all the great work that you do and expanding opportunities for young people. So we look forward to continuing on this journey and helping you to build more seamless and high impact bridges between education and the workforce. So thank you so much for joining us and have a wonderful afternoon, everyone.